Tea time.
Welcome everybody, Souldin of the Grin brothers here, and it's time for another episode of Tea Time. Now then, for today's tea, I will be having raspberry, lime and goji berry tea. Except I'm not having it now because I had it in the past. It's another one of those teas I tried out at Mr. Teapot, the little independent tea store that I visited. You know, it's like a tea cafe. And so I got to try out this fruit tea there, and took down some notes so I can share them with you later, here, you know. So I'm not going to be sipping my tea during this recording, so it should hopefully cut down on some time, but I shall be talking about that tea later. So let's move straight on to the subject, and this subject concerns two particular video games, although I'm probably going to be focused more of the discussion on one of these video games. And they're video games with a bit in common at the moment. Those being Dead or Alive 6 and Soulcalibur 6. Now, you know, things they have in common include the fact that they've both got 6 in the title. They're both fighting games. Latest installments coming out close enough to one another. Soulcalibur 6 is coming out this October, and Dead or Alive 6 is coming out next February, so, you know, only a few months apart. They're both games currently being talked about. They're both games which I want to watch the EVO footage of if I ever get around to. They're both games that I've enjoyed playing entries within the series a lot. I really enjoyed Dead or Alive Dimension and Dead or Alive 5 last round, and I really enjoyed Soulcalibur 2 and Soulcalibur 3. They are also both games which have meters, which frankly shouldn't have meter systems in them. I really don't think that Dead or Alive 6 or Soulcalibur 6 really are well suited for being games with meter systems in, and they obviously feel very tacked on. But these games have meters for them and sort of like finisher moves sort of thing, which is a shame, but that's a thing done. These are also currently games which have been a bit of a debate recently. It's a little less so. Like this tea time, I'm not sure if it's weaker in the fact that it's been done later, or if it makes me less foolish for doing it at a later point. But basically, Soulcalibur 6 is very much unashamed of itself. Soulcalibur 6, after Soulcalibur 5, is going back and going to its roots in a lot of areas. But one area it never really deterred away from too much, but is really sort of going whole hulk in, is a certain charm to it in the sex appeal factor. You know, there's many beautiful female characters. Sophia has her short skirt as per usual. Talum has a thong, even though she's like 15. Taki, well, there's certainly elements you can obviously see on her are well endowed as ever. And Ivy is, well, there's a lot to say about Ivy. And of course the male characters get in there too. I mean, Maxie's always got it, and Keelik always expose their chests. And Voldo, oh wow, his entire character design is based off sex appeal. I mean, come on. He is the sex symbol of fighting games. And of course then there's Dead or Alive, which has always had that as a aspect to it. You know, I realise I've started talking about this like 3 minutes in and I haven't actually gone into the title of it, but I'll get to that in a second. You know, it's always got the sexualization as an aspect to it. It's always been kind of inrooted in its identity, you know, breast physics, jiggle physics and all that. And it kind of has become known for it. Yeah, at the start of things with Dead or Alive 6, it has since somewhat changed, though there is grounds for questioning based off previous interviews and such. There has been cause for pause, as it were, because Dead or Alive 6 seems to have been approaching things in toning down the sexualized aspect. Meanwhile, as stated, Soulcalibur 6 has been unashamed of its sexualization aspect. Ivy's been front and center, as she always is, sort of thing, and they've not been trying to, you know, move away from that in any way. In fact, they seem to have emphasized it more with some of these HD character designs and such. Meanwhile, Dead or Alive 6 changed Kazumi's default outfit, jiggle physics have been reduced, and there's a lot of developer interview comments which have suggested a different direction, even if these latest trailers, ever since the February release date reveal trailer of Dead or Alive 6, have certainly shown to have more of its initial charm back to it in a lot of aspects, not just the sexualization aspect, but a lot of aspects. The trailer has generally since gone a lot better. But yeah, that's kind of the point I wanted to talk about, because these two games, you know, I've seen discussed in comment sections quite a lot. I've mostly seen this sort of conversation in Silicon Era, but for this tea time, I've actually gathered information on a lot of games here, from quite a few sites here. And it seems to be this sexual ground, which seems to be, the sex appeal ground, I mean. There seems to be a bit of a debate with these two games and how they're being currently perceived and debated over. And so I came up with a very cool title for this sort of video, Dead or Sexy. And, I thought, hey, let's talk about that. I'm a fan of both games, so I feel I can talk about them somewhat, even if I've not played all entries in the series, but I am a fan of both games, and I'm looking forward to playing both of them. Now, so, I don't mind sex appeal in games. It's not exactly been my main focus. In fact, I tend to be considered a very prudish person. However, I will admit that Dead or Alive series and its connection to sex appeal has always been part of its sort of charm, as it were. It's always been rooted into the game itself. Removing that removes a bit of its character. It starts to lose focus on its identity somewhat. And to be fair, with the whole idea of, some people can say, oh no, they're not moving away that much. I mean, they're still very attractive female characters, and from latest trailers you see a lot of the usual sexuality, sex appeal aspects to it. So it's not like they've moved away completely from it, sort of thing. And I can get that. Although I feel this is more a case of later trailers. As I said, it's a case of its identity, sort of thing. I don't mind too much of it in of itself, whether a game has that or not. But I feel the trying to move away from that entirely and trying to shun it in a sense, which isn't new to Dead or Alive series. They tried to do that with Dead or Alive 5, and well, look how things turned out with 5 last round. They tried to give a more serious, grim-faced approach, and then gradually, they got back to the more sort of, happy, energetic sort of thing, with, of course, the sex appeal as an aspect to it. Something that didn't take itself too seriously. And I feel that's somewhat coming about with Dead or Alive 6 already. And I feel some of that could be because of fan feedback. Because there was a bit of negativity towards its approach to things. Again, they started things off with, mentioning that, showing off Kazumi in a different outfit. And things got toned down with the breast physics and such. Which is odd, to say the least. And there's things to sort of indicate that they were trying to move away from the breast physics and try to get themselves taken more seriously once again. Stuff here such as... Let's read through. Stuff like, there's apparently comments before they've had of image of characters to focus on cool. Apparently there was some mentioned, I believe Shimbori mentioned, that some people, found the girls too sexy and embarrassing to play as. So they wanted to emphasise more the cool. I mean, the whole theme of the game is apparently intense fighting game entertainment, for instance. And so, there's apparently been some inspiration from, American comic books for the designs of the costumes and such. And the default costumes in general seem to be a little less revealing or a little less, or more sort of, fighting oriented as well. Hitomi, for instance, her karate gi has suddenly become her standard costume instead of her, usual sort of jeans and jacket sort of thing. And Kazumi's has changed quite a bit, sort of thing. And apparently, reasons for why the characters jiggle physics, which returned more so when Hinoku got introduced, and has since been more prominent in later trailers. They were apparently wanted to focus more on it, making it more realistic based off the clothing choices and such. And those are reasonings, but combined with a lot of this, what they're saying, wanting to focus less on the sexy and such. Again, only certain articles have mentioned this. I kind of had to pick a mix. I've got a bunch of sources sort of in the summary below. It's more the mindset of the interviews which is actually the worrying part, really. Less so the actual development of the game. Because the development of the game has gone through its natural course, and you see more of Dead or Alive's identity returning. Again, the thing is, I don't mind about the jiggle physics in or out debate sort of thing. It's more a case of Dead or Alive needing an identity, and it doesn't really give itself an identity if it's removing what has always been kind of a core concept to it. A core point to it. And it's something that kind of gave it a fun factor. It's always kind of been a very easygoing series, I feel. It's one that, contrary to, say, Dead or Alive 4, which was really hard to play through, it feels very easy to go into. People think some people have explained it better in saying that you can always do something cool in Dead or Alive. And not even in terms of a big, super flashy, super move sort of thing. Punching and moving and such always felt cool. There was Dead or Alive always had a very strong visual aspect to it, and hey, part of that is the sex appeal as well. The characters are all, and again, not just the female characters, the male characters too. There's a lot of attractive characters on display, and the graphics portray them really well. In fact, in regards to the sex appeal, I feel like the sweat feature they actually introduced in Dead or Alive 5 is actually one of the best ones they did, because it can have this sexy vibe to it, whilst also being something that makes sense as fighters, and to make sense within a fighting game sort of thing, and something cool to see happen over time, much like, say, armor breaks in Soulcalibur. They do it more of a case of it happens after a strong attack sort of thing to show, this is how powerful your blow was, this was how powerful your super move was sort of thing. You got a really strong hit on them rather than sustained damage, but it's a cool sort of feature, sort of see the characters changing over the course of the battle. I think I quite like it when games do that. Okay, so as I was saying, one of the key things in regards to how things have been going, apparently one of the key reasons as to why certain things were less focused on, such as the, sex appeal, as it were, at the start, is that Dead or Alive 6 is using a new engine. This actually kind of worries me most of all, because the soft engine, which they initially used, which also was used in Project Zero Made in Blackwater, well, I mean, you saw what that could do on the Wii U, which, wasn't as efficient as, like, the PS4 and Xbox One, but Project Zero Made in Blackwater looks amazing. And I find it very strange that they moved away from the soft engine. Apparently the reasoning is, wanting different lightings and such, but I feel the soft engine is not only still was a decent engine, I think it's still a decent engine, and they kind of put more work on themselves having to move over to another engine. Another thing that, of course, had to be changed, because they had to basically build most of the characters from the ground up for this new engine. Of course, that includes the motion physics and trying to even program the motion physics. It seems a bit strange because the soft engine had already kind of nailed that perfectly. It nailed doing the Dead or Alive style perfectly. And I think that, again, kind of rolls into the problem of where Dead or Alive 6's initial approach was going with things. In that it did seem like it was both, maybe it was purely just because of the soft engine thing, or, that they were changing an engine and trying to change things up. Or maybe it is because an interviewer focused on wanting to make it a little less sexy and try to get new people in. They apparently said they aren't aiming for an Evo crowd. Evo has recently been stopping sexy costumes, as it were, some being displayed on broadcasts and such. But you get this vibe from a few of the interviews. You can read a few of them below with Shimbori, I believe, is the director. I think the One Angry Gamer ones talk about it more, but they are also seem to be more opinion-based sort of in articles, because they end up kind of throwing out counter-arguments. Silicon Era and its comment sections tend to cover it well in terms of having sort of showing off that sort of point as well. But and Shoryuken, I believe, has addressed it too a little bit. Yeah, you get one or two different ways you can see how it's been developing. Either one, it was purely because of the engine, or two, it was a mindset that they thought it would be better to move away from Dead or Alive's identity as the jiggle physics game and try to get itself taken more seriously as a fighter, much like they tried to do with Dead or Alive 5. Of course, that hasn't been working, seemingly clashed from the comment sections I've seen a lot, with people kind of holding up Soulcalibur 6 as a game which is for the fans. Like, so there's a note, I believe, mentioning before that Shimbori believes that Dead or Alive 6 is being made for the fans. And yeah, it's always been a case of, in the comment section I've seen, that Soulcalibur 6 is the one that seems to be being credited a lot as for the fans. I wouldn't say it's nearly as bad as the Dragon Ball FighterZ versus Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite situation, but there are some parallels you can draw through that. The Shimbori's interviews seem to not gel too well with the Dead or Alive fan from what I've seen across the comment sections and such. Whereas the Soulcalibur 6 ones, even with shoddy things such as, an early DLC announcement, has generally gone over pretty well, and people are clamouring for it because of the return of fan favourites and all that. So, I think one case to be said, regardless of how the identity problem, moving away from the soft engine and wanting to, or alternatively, moving and trying to aim for a different demographic as well, or try to draw different people into the series. One thing that was noted, I believe, is Shimbori mentioned that in later interviews that slight changes based on feedbacks have been seen and I feel that sort of comment, particularly for I think this was a comment in regards to the latest trailer where they revealed Tina Bass and Mia. and that trailer is looking a lot better. Again, every trailer since the February release date trailer has looked a lot better for Dead or Alive 6. And, sort of, it's got more, it seems to be more energetic, more sort of, you can see a bit, whilst they've got a bit of the serious storyline there, seems a bit of the cheese in there still, a bit of the sort of humour and a bit of the jiggle, as it were. And I feel like, the comment sections, the feedback there could have actually ended up directing as well. Or it could simply be that, again, they were struggling with their new engine. I mean, there's questions again. You didn't really need to move on to an engine. The soft engine was perfectly serviceable, but, that's how it's been going. I ultimately don't have too much of a end point, as it were, to really say about that. I just find it interesting, the difference in how they're being perceived. Dead or Alive 6 and Soulcalibur 6 have kind of got are trying to aim for the fans market. At least in terms of Dead or Alive 6 says they're aiming for the fans. How it feels based off interviews and such as of late, it's Soulcalibur 6 which has been doing the better job of aiming for the fans. Admittedly, you would know where to go after Soulcalibur 5, and they've been doing a lot of things to grab people's attention because of its reboot nature and introducing a lot of fan favourite characters, and bring them all back and making them all look really cool and such. And Dead or Alive 6 hasn't managed to quite grab that, although I do think that the latest trailers have shown whether it's a case of, again, they took time to put in some of the things that people wanted, they are listening to the fans. There are some worries, to it all. They have already mentioned that gravure and tag battle modes are not featured at all, which is a shame. I don't care too much for the gravure mode, but the tag battle modes are awesome, so I'm kind of disappointed that isn't in. But still, again, you worry, you start to wonder a bit, is it simply because they wanted more focus on the single player, or is the gravure, again, part of their search for a new identity? But then again, does Dead or Alive 6 need a new identity? I feel Dead or Alive 6 always had itself a comfortable identity. It had an identity which is better than no identity. Yes, sure, it was known as the Jiggle Physics game, but I feel that you could be comfortably within that realm of thing in that category, while still aiming for the highlighting the identity aspects that I feel Dead or Alive has always had. It's a simple to understand system that's kind of rock, paper, scissors in, strikes, holds, and grabs. And it's really cool being able to do cool stuff from a get-go, as well as having a fun game which didn't rely on meters and supers, which of course they then ruined. That's actually my ultimate problem with both these games, actually. The meters. I don't want either game to have meters. I feel that it's been really janky in Soulcalibur 4 and 5 having super meters and super moves. So I'm not a fan of it being in Dead or Alive 6 as well. But yeah. I just find it interesting the perception they've received and the fact they have been going very different directions so far. Again, this tea time feels a bit strange in that I feel my point would have been better made beforehand, but at the same time I feel now, before Dead or Alive 6 started to show that they are grabbing a bit more of their old identity back before the initial release. But then again, I could have made it look foolish if I jumped to conclusions. I feel that, again, the Dead or Alive 5 situation is a good one to look at. Dead or Alive 5 tried to present itself all super serious and all that, and yet in the end it still went the way of, fun, ecchi time with really good, really easy to understand and really easy to get into fighting games being its core. So yeah, that's kind of just wanted me to sort of say, it's an interesting situation. The Dead or Sexy thing could be a little interesting thing of how well Dead or Alive 6 does in comparison to Soulcalibur 6, maybe based off of how they have been presented and how they in turn have been perceived. I will say, perception is kind of a big thing nowadays. You can see that with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I think Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is a really good, fun game, but its perception really crippled it, It's, another part of its problems it has, but perception of it has been a big problem as well. The interviews were diabolical. Still, again, not nearly as extreme as a situation. This isn't Dragon Ball FighterZ vs. Marvel vs. Capcom, but I think it's a situation that can be comparable in terms of how there's a debate about how these games are perceived, and how in a few circles I've seen they have been pitted against each other for one embracing an aspect and the other trying to shun it, but since then been trying to embrace it more. They both also have had screwy DLCs practices. Soulcalibur 6 is apparently because the storyline doesn't fit the character in. they wanted to get the character in because they saw the character was popular, but they didn't. They already got the character roster, so they're like, okay, we've got enough time to make the character, but we'll have that as the pre-order bonus because they don't fit in. And Soulcalibur and Dead or Alive 6 has been a case of like Neo Tengu and Phase 4 have become pre-order bonus characters due to the fact they went over budget, and so they needed to kind of legitimize to the higher ups. Okay, why are we going over budget? Oh, don't worry, this will be the pre-order incentive sort of thing. Interesting way how that sort of works. Not a fan of making characters pre-order bonuses. Not even a fan of making characters DLC. Stages and items and costumes and all that, sure, but the characters. But yeah, okay, I'm getting a bit off topic here, and I kind of concluded my topic. It's an interesting thing to mention, yeah, I got to talk about the tea before I wrap things up. Yes, the raspberry lime goji tea berry tea wasn't actually the tea I tried. Mum tried it, but she bought it. And I got to try it out. I was having the Milton Keynes special tea at the time. Not a big fan of it. But the raspberry lime goji berry tea is a fruit tea, 8 minutes plus, and from brand Mr. Teapot. And here's why I wrote about it. It definitely has raspberry in it. The strong of its freeze flavours. A strong fruit tea with an incredible aftertaste and a lime flavour that stays on the tip of your tongue. I've never really eaten a goji berry on its own before. Like, I'm sure I've had goji berry, but always with other stuff, like with flavours or with drinks or thing. So I never actually had a goji berry on its own, so I probably couldn't identify that specific taste. But I could identify the raspberry. It's very strong raspberry, and the lime. It kind of went to your tip of your tongue, so you could tell where the lime was going, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the raspberry lime goji berry, Mum had the better tea there. I wasn't a big fan of the Milton Keynes specialty tea. That was a bit of a strange mishmash fruit salad tea, effectively. The raspberry lime and goji berry tea was a lot more focused, and as such, it allowed the flavours to individually shine a bit more, even if the raspberry was kind of the dominant flavour. But yeah, that was my tea time, dead or sexy. I was debating whether to talk about the subject because those trailers would start to come out and start to change the narrative of the subject. But I'd already come up with a cool title like Dead or Sexy, and it's like, yeah, I gotta make the tea time. It's gonna be interesting seeing whether they'll change things around, as it were. Has Dead or Alive 6 managed to retain its identity or successfully grabbed itself a new identity in time? Will the interviews and previous perception have negatively affected it? Or, will Soulcalibur 6, despite its unashamed way of presenting itself, still not do too well for various reasons? Well, we're going to see. It's going to be a bit of a wait in between, between Soulcalibur 6 and Dead or Alive 6, but it's not too long a one. And I plan to get both, by the way. I really like both games series, so I'm down for getting both. But yeah, it's an interesting situation, and what are your thoughts on it? What are your thoughts on sex appeal in fighting games, the identity of video games, and moving, and I mean that in terms of what games are kind of known for, and what kind of gives a game its character and charm sort of thing. Sometimes it's the character, sometimes it's its own mechanics, sometimes it's just the way they approach things. Help them set out from the other games within their genre. So, what are your thoughts on that in regards to Dead or Alive 6 and how Soulcalibur 6 has been handling its presentation and its way of appealing to fans and such? I'd love to hear your thoughts below, but for now, cheerio!